I don't really blame people as much as understand that it's a knowledge gap. You may be speaking with an engineer where they're fixing a fault, but you realize that no real planning has gone into solving that, fixing that fault. So you go there and you say, okay, I need to replace a transformer. Okay, what of the works, the engineering works that need to be done? What of the recabling? So you have not really gone to the site to assess what is needed to restore supply. And that makes for inefficiencies. And we've seen this problem extrapolated even across the sector. We need to see the value chain. The problems must be solved from end to end. So even if you say, okay, I want to bring in this capacity worth of generation, as you say, who's going to take it?
Does this thing work? In 1972, Inez Okoro wrote a book titled 1 Week, 1 Trouble. While we're not discussing the book today, many Nigerians would argue that it is in fact 1 day, 1 trouble. A lot of people see problems and think this is broken, and while some see the same problem and ask, why was it designed this way in the first place? My guest today is one of those such people. He spent her career working across Europe and Africa, transforming state-owned enterprises and advising boards. What makes her different is how she thinks. For her, power isn't just about power plants and power lines, it's about whether a country works. Today, we're asking, why do African countries continue to adopt models that don't work and that don't fit reality? If you've ever wondered why some countries get it right and why some countries don't, this episode is for you. Welcome to Connecting the Dots. I'm Emeka Barr Jr., and my guest today is Barrister Olajumoke Delano. She's a former head of regulatory and government relations at AEDC and the current board member for Graced Energy Professionals for Africa. Jumoke, how are you?
I'm great, Emeka. It's great to be here on Connecting the Dots once again.
Your career has been quite interesting. I'm sure the people you sat with in law school probably have very different careers. Could you walk us through that process, how you went from being a lawyer to now being a really an energy expert?
Thank you, Emeka. That is quite an interesting journey, spanning, I think, over 30 years now. And I started traditionally in legal services, made the transition to banking. And whilst I worked in banking, I was not in the legal department. I was working in operations, learned how to pay money to customers, worked in customer services, and just got a hang of the operational processes that drive
what made you
banking.
pivot?
Honestly, money.
That's a good motivation.
Because by the time I was leaving school, I felt law was not as exciting as in the movies, in Law and Order, and all these films we used to watch, LA Law. And so and the banks were paying better. So if you didn't get into the oil company, then the next thing you wanted was the bank. So that's what made me actually go into the bank. And I thought I'd have nothing to do with law anymore. But, life, God had different plans, certainly. Yeah, sure.
So you went from the law firm to banking. How did that happen?
Okay, so I worked in banking, worked in, as I say, operations, then did some telemarketing in banking, worked with Diamond Bank, which is now Access, worked with Citibank.
Okay.
In legal and compliance, did some legal and compliance, did telemarketing, did financial reporting. But something bothered me. And that was that, whilst I worked in commercial banking, it was really all about importing consumables. And there was a dissatisfaction in me that surely there must be more to life than importing rice, and importing things that people eat. How does this affect the growth of Nigeria as a country? How do we affect the real sector? So I was getting dissatisfied, with after doing that for about 4 years, I wanted something different. And so one of the ways I attacked this was, let me go and do a master's degree.
Okay.
So I went to Queen Mary College, University of London, did a master's degree in banking and finance law.
Okay.
Now, the interesting thing about why I've always liked banking and finance is that it noses into every aspect of the economy. There's no aspect of the economy that is not financed, So I did that, did the LLM in banking and finance law, got qualified as a solicitor in England and Wales, went to New York and became an attorney, counsel at law at
Why
State
did
of
you
New
come
York.
back?
I wasn't planning to, actually.
Interesting.
Marriage.
That man.
Yes. So while I was in the UK, my husband was in the UK at the time.
Okay.
And so we started talking. He had been my longtime friend, but our relationship changed. And, when we decided to get married, he had no plans. He hadn't seen any vision, saying we need to leave. My plan was actually to work either in New York or in London, the financial nerve centers.
Yeah,
so
given
that
all
the certifications and all the work, so. But after we discussed, we agreed that we would live in Nigeria. So that was actually why I came back.
Wow.
So
when did you come back? If
I came back 2006.
Okay, Nigeria was pretty normal then.
Yeah, quite normal.
It's pretty normal.
And I started to volunteer. So I was volunteering with a reform group, a working group on the reform of investment law, which was led by Professor Olajumoke and the partner in one of the law firms, Abdullahi Taiwo and Co., Chief Taiwo. So while doing that volunteer work, they saw my CV and they recommended me for a role in Infrastructure Bank.
Okay.
So I interviewed for the role and got it, and now started working as an investment officer, legal officer, moved to heading the investment legal department, moved to being alternative company secretary, and and so that was how I came into investments and infrastructure. And I found it very satisfying because there's just such a tangibility, to working in infrastructure, because there was no water, now there is. There was no light, now there is.
Yeah.
There are jobs, so there's
very transformative.
Very transformative, and the impact gladdens your heart, says, oh, this work I'm doing actually makes a difference in the lives of people. So that was how I entered into infrastructure, did that for about 6 years, and then I was at a party. A 50-year-old, my boss at that time, the CEO, was having his 50th birthday. So we're at the dinner. And the lady I sat beside, so go to dinners, the lady I sat beside, who had also recruited me for the job at Infrastructure Bank, said, okay, there's this role that is in Abuja Electricity, and I think you'd be a good fit. Do you think you'd like to interview for it? So it's like, now the interesting thing was, before that, I'd taken an interest in power because I just felt this power is not rocket science. It's not. There must be a way to figure out. And instead of waiting for people to come and fix the problem, we should be able to fix it.
Yeah.
We shouldn't wait for other people. We travel abroad all the time. How have they been able to fix it? So I had even applied for a fellowship in economic development, power, in the Hubert Humphrey fellowship. Now, the interesting thing, that was another interesting story for me, because I applied for the fellowship and traveled to the US. As I arrived in the US, I saw an email inviting me for an interview in Lagos.
Oh, wow.
In a week's time or in 2 days' time. And that was pre-COVID. So the idea of online meetings had not caught on. So despite my numerous appeals to do it online, they said I should apply the next year. So I just forgot all about it. But so when this opportunity, I was like, yes, So when the opportunity came to actually be chief legal officer, company secretary in a utility company, I jumped at it. I was like, wow, Yeah, why not? Surely.
Yeah. No, it's super interesting because my journey is a little bit similar. You're a lawyer, I'm an economist. I moved back and I thought power was definitely all about engineering.
Mm.
But then you realize it's just people
Yeah,
and systems and being able to
absolutely.
design projects that make sense.
Mm.
One of the earlier podcast episodes of this series, we interviewed a professor from MIT called Jason Jay, and his real focus is around systemic investing. That a number of times people design projects in the developing world and they just do it based on, I want to put a power plant here, not having done the work of who would be the off-taker, who would like more or less do the entire value chain from start to
Absolutely.
finish. And it sounds like that's how you think about problems as well in the power sector. So as chief legal, and obviously afterwards, I'm sure you've seen projects you're like, this doesn't make sense. So how do you convince people, well, to do those things that they should be doing?
So really, I don't really blame people as much as understand that it's a knowledge gap. And even in Abuja Electricity, those whilst I work there, you may be speaking with an engineer where they're fixing a fault. But you realize that no real planning has gone into solving that, fixing that fault. So you go there and you say, okay, I need to replace a transformer. Okay, what of the engineering works that need to be done? What of the recabling? So you have not really gone to the site to assess what is needed to restore supply. So you need a transformer, but perhaps other than the transformer, you need other things. And that makes for inefficiencies. And we've seen this problem extrapolated even across the sector. Because just like you mentioned, we need to see the value chain. The problems must be solved from end to end. So even if you say, okay, I want to bring in this capacity worth of generation, as you say, who's going to take it? How will they take it? We have that how will they take it is one of the challenges that has besetted the generation. Some NIPP plants that today are not
Sitting idle.
it's because how will they take it? So who is going to take it is even there because there's a huge demand, but how will they take it?
Have you built the infrastructure to
Exactly.
get people to actually take the power, or are you just hoping
Yes.
that they'll take the power?
Will they pay?
Yeah.
How will they pay?
What are they producing if it's not for productive use?
Yeah.
The most people can't. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another issue that has recurred is a recurring decimal in the power sector. It's like, and this debate between the distribution companies and transmission is like, don't take this power to this community where they cannot pay. Take this power to my load center where, so there's a whole conversation. The interesting thing about the power sector is that while there are so many different pieces owned by different people, it's a chain.
If one doesn't work, the other can't work.
Everybody's.
And even just the conversation of NISO, the split between the TSP and now you have the system operator.
Yeah.
Everywhere in the world, those groups are separated. They're two different companies. The market owns the system operator because they're the ones that operate the market, as opposed to here where it was joined together. So if you're operating the system and your friends at TSP misbehave, you can't find them because you're under one company.
Yeah.
So now this separation should improve how things are done. And that really just boils down to the governance of it and ensuring that happens. But I also think from how things have worked in Africa as opposed to other locales, a lot of projects people bring to Africa are just designed on how it works in Europe and in North America. And when they show up, some people buy it hook, line, and sinker, and they try to implement those type of projects. Is there, from your experience, how can Africans and be a bit more mindful in ensuring that doesn't happen?
So we're back to this knowledge gap
Mm.
and the need to ensure that the right people are in the room when those discussions are taking place. People can't do more than you have equipped them for. Are the right people in the rooms where these discussions are being taken place? So if the right people are not in the room, to the extent of the capacity, they will then, the right stakeholders. The other thing about force-fitting a design is also about the funder. Sometimes funders, donors have their own impact they're trying to make with a particular project. So you need to have a conversation that ensures that there's a synergy between the funding that the donor or the lender is bringing and your own objective. So whilst you are sometimes, well, I want this funding, so I want to do whatever is required to get it, but it must meet your own requirements. Otherwise, there's going to be a misfit. Yes.
But isn't that the approach that you have? For instance, the programs that we've run through all have a logical framework that says these are the things that this program must do over the next 5 years. Speaking about Power Africa or UKNAV, very clear on what they must accomplish. Now, what makes it tricky is someone has done their log frame to do this.
Yeah.
You're the receiving agency. And instead of saying, no, this doesn't make sense, because we're trying to create jobs and trying to create support, we take it. And sometimes those things end up just being things that end up on a shelf because you do all these fantastic projects, but now trying to implement it, it doesn't work. How can, I guess your point about capacity, right people in the right room, and then also not having it being force fit to make it work could change those things. But all those things seem to be very subjective, right? Because capacity is very relative, right? Because some people think they know, but in actuality, they don't know. So I think it's for power, especially, we're a place where people have to understand that just because it's worked this way in Ghana doesn't mean it can work this way in Nigeria.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's just speaking of just the different locales, after you left ADC, you started doing some really interesting work with the new Electricity Act, focused around states doing trying to move the sector forward by creating their own marketplace. How has that been? On my end, I've done some work in that, and there's been some really successful cases, and then there's been some cases where you're like, probably should stay with the grid.
So I don't know if you've ever heard this phrase that if you don't know how to paste, don't copy. So
ChatGPT teams out to a lot of people this day and age.
if you don't know how, so that's the idea about bringing something in and ensuring that it fits the local context. Now, the development of state electricity markets, for me, I'm an advocate, a firm believer, I'm an optimist.
But we just mentioned capacity being a challenge. How are you an optimist, given that
I am
the
an
NERC
optimist.
or the regulator, they've got the capacity, but that capacity in Nigeria is very small. So if you're sitting in, I don't know, let's say Ebonyi State, and how are you going to, no shit on being from Ebonyi, fine, Anambra, where I'm from. If you're from Anambra, how are you going to attract the person from Abuja to move to Oka to help you develop this sector, given that the demand for talent is on the rise? So how do you build that capacity?
So there are different ways. And this example you've given, I'll use the example of Abia State, where they have a regulatory commission and they've attracted some good hands, even from Big Brother NERC, So that's one of the ways you do is the existing regulator collaborate. That collaboration, I keep on talking about it, even in LinkedIn posts, that there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Even NERC, this sector, the energy sector is so dynamic that you need to keep on building your capacity. So even if you had capacity 5 years ago, you can't stay on that capacity because things change so fast. So one is the existing regulator, that's NERC. NERC, you will see that quite a number of people, staff, have moved to the State Electricity Regulatory Commission.
I've taken leaves, I've moved.
Of
I'm like,
course.
interesting.
Yes. Then you have the Africa School of Regulation, which is actually now being chaired by somebody who used to be in NERC.
Who?
Dr. Shetima.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So you can imagine that capacity it's just that it's not in the numbers. But now you need to ramp up by developing appropriate courses, even when consultants come. For example, the work that donors like UKNIF do, next year, it has to be suitable for the requirements. So one of the things I've done in the last year, work specifically with Oyo, with Enugu, and with Akwa Ibom states. And when UKNIF realized that this is 3 out of 36, everybody needs this training. How can this be extended in order to be able to serve? And so what they did was to do a series of workshops, regional workshops across 4 hubs in Lagos, in Jos, in Calabar, and in Kano, covering the states in that area, walking them through 12 different courses on the development of state electricity markets as a start.
Was it just a one-off, or was it a way to... Did they leave any material to now?
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Left materials, and also have engaged with other donors like GIZ, to take off from where UKNIF left off. And there was even an event where all the different initiatives that UKNIF had worked on in the 5 years were up for uptake by different other donor agencies to ensure continuity. What about universities? In one of the events that we've had, at least in UKNIF, was even the need for universities, bringing in stakeholders from the universities to start to design programs that are relevant and appropriate to the market situation in which we find ourselves. There's no point developing these theoretical courses that absolutely nobody is going to use them at the end of the day.
And there's also no point in moving things just because we've been teaching engineering this way. If, from what I recall, there's no Nigerian university on the public side that does a course on renewable energy.
No, there is.
There is. Interesting.
Because it's in the East. I was on a panel on the climate network, Africa Climate Network, and there is actually one of the universities in the East that does that. In fact, one of the things I wanted to mention and that fascinates me so much about power is that it's multidisciplinary. Yes. So the engineers they want to claim ownership of power, but it's not true. I mean, we lawyers, we have our own space, the economists and the engineers, accountants. Everybody can find their place it is such a dynamic area, and the multiplicity of expertise required to be able to deliver a project also ensures the sustainability of those projects.
Yeah, no, that's completely correct, because remember GIZ did the IMAS projects back in, those were the first iterations of mini grid back in 2013, 2014. And a number of
integrated mini grid accelerator scheme.
Yeah, something came out of that around anchor customers. If you're not productive, unfortunately, people like power, but actually, if you're not using it to make money, your willingness and ability to pay reduces.
Yeah.
So from the work you've done, how do you, I don't want to say push, but how do you suggest, or how do you show people that it's actually important to pay for power as opposed to just consuming it? Because access is great, but if it's not productive.
How would you even be able to pay? After a while, you can't pay for the power. So with the states, one of the things I've seen with the states we've worked with is there's a lot of interest in developing an off-grid strategy. And in developing the off-grid strategy, they want to be self-sustaining as states because of the challenges with being connected to the grid. So no doing away with the grid, but how can we, in view of the energy gap that still exists despite the grid, how do we close that gap using resources that are available to us, off-grid sources that give us some control over the energy? And then when you start to do that, you now have to start to think about who is going to take this energy? Who should we prioritize first? And then we see states also looking at developing industrial clusters, because that is key, for you to have anchor loads, customers that can take substantial, amounts of capacity. So that is in the blueprints in development. And one of the things that UK and I have also did was to do the IRP framework, integrated resource planning framework for the state, so that they can run with it and ensure that the decisions that they are taking are data-based. Not just, oh, I like this person. Somebody has brought an unsolicited bid, and there's an unsolicited bid that, okay, this person wants to supply energy to this area. No. What is the plan? Where's the overall direction that the state is going? What's the energy gap? What will it be? How will it grow over a period of time? What are the resources that are local? What are the generating plants that are close, that they can optimize, to be able to meet their energy demand, so that there is a very structured and systematic approach to addressing, the energy challenges within the state.
But I enjoy the fact that we've talked about you can have quite a bit, because they've been very intentional with getting work done. And I've been part and parcel of that process for a little bit. But I've also realized that sometimes data, what you're getting from a utility and what is actually happening are two completely different things.
Yeah.
How do you marry those conversations?
So data is the big deal, big challenge. And I agree with what you've said, because working in a utility and ensuring the consistency of data from month to month was an ongoing, issue in the regulatory department, ensuring data integrity.
Yeah.
But you must put in the parameters to be able to check. And the regulator also has some dashboards, and they have a way, that's NERC, I'm talking about NERC now. They have ways of comparing your data from month to month.
Yeah.
So that's one. The other thing is consolidating the different data sources and using them as checks and balances against each other. So you have an agency like Rural Electrification Agency that has done a lot of work in the bid for you to develop mini grids. You need data. And so they have not relied on disco data.
That's why they've done the Odyssey, all the different that they've more or less taken the agency of saying, I must do it, because
I spoke with another company recently also, that what they're trying to do across energy and just oil and gas and power is to consolidate the data in a system that is available on the web, that allows people to validate, because decisions are only as good as the data from which you've made those decisions.
So interestingly enough, we've done some support on helping a utility clean up its data. And when you now send in the cleaned up version to the management, they're shocked at the data, the state of the data. But then you talk to the people who are inputting it in, they don't quite see the big picture. And it just becomes like, why don't you know that the impact of this data you're entering that's incorrect is actually affecting the bottom line of the disco? So I think there's a problem where folks here are very siloed. They don't quite understand the bigger picture. Did you see that while you were at the disco?
So the thing is that it has to do with the systems. Let's come back to the issue of systems, because in an organization, you should not permit the silo. You should have a system that ensures and enforces that people put accurate data into one system. Why should your management information systems be in silos? Even that is a problem already. So you must have a way of consolidating the data, and not just consolidating it, but checking to ensure that the data is not compromised. Because sometimes the data is compromised through attempts to manipulate the information in order to favor or to get a particular outcome.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because the thing also that so one of the things that a few of us did back in the day was we really helped create a monitoring system for the service-based tariff. We created a dashboard that has gone through a few different iterations. The first bit was DSOs at the different substations would enter power uptime and downtime. Great, but still human centric.
Yeah.
Because if the DSO decides not to do it, you first of all, you can't force them because you don't have the regulatory muscle to do it. But NERC, this is a NERC initiative, so NERC got involved and pushed that they do it. Second, so we went through that process, but we realized that the data wasn't accurate because someone would say I'm in band A and I'm only getting 11 hours of power and I'm just getting 20. But if you go to the sheet, oh, they're getting 20. Not accurate. Went to the next phase of, okay, let's now do, let's plug into your system.
Absolutely.
And pull the data
directly
themselves. That went well, but some very powerful discos and some very powerful people were able to navigate and were able to push back against that. But NERC stood firm. And even some of the discos, they cut them in their hands in a cookie jar and said, I see what you're doing. We're supposed to be N-1, but you're N-24 hours. Doesn't work. You must give me the data real time. Now, where we are now is discos across border now plugged into a system where NERC can actually pull real-time data.
Yeah.
And you can see how that has changed. And then, but one thing I've also realized is just because you force them to change doesn't mean they're going to change. Now, the incentive of a band B or band A is massive, where you're seeing discos on a monthly basis are rolling people over to band A because power supply has increased and now they're able to collect more money to pay their bills. Is an economic incentive always required to get people to do what they're supposed to do? A very long-winded way of asking that question.
Well, so, there's the carrot and the stick. So the economic incentive is the carrot, right? And the punitive measure is the stick. Both are applied, at different times. And the thing with NERC is that they inserted that requirement for compliance with monitoring into the key performance indicators of the distribution companies. And so every quarter, they would measure the performance of those, measure compliance. And for those that do not comply, they have a host of different punitive measures that will be taken, including withdrawal of of the know your licensee approvals for management.
QS, yeah.
So both of them, I think there's the time you need the carrots. But if you have carrots and people are not interested in your carrots,
you've got to bring out a big stick.
He wants to bring out, the stick. So both are complementary. That's the way I see it. But there must be an incentive, a beneficial. Maybe the short answer is that there must be a benefit to be derived or a punishment to be suffered. I'll give you an example. Whilst working in the utility, there's this provision for one of this compliance with one of these agencies. And one of the things we had to ask was, what is the effect if I don't comply? And we looked through the law. Nothing.
It's almost like if people don't see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or with the oil and gas companies, before the gas flaring, when you see that the amount you pay as
To clean up,
penalties
yeah.
is higher
Yeah.
than penalties for non-compliance, I'll not
You
come.
flare the thing and move on and go straight. It might not want to do it from an environmental point of view.
Absolutely.
But because unfortunately, bottom line is what runs everything. So you focus on
Whilst
that.
you are putting your acts together,
Uh-huh.
to the point where you're ready to comply, sometimes that's what organizations decide. Yeah. Absolutely.
Then maybe just to land on this note, you've enjoyed a really good career throughout Nigeria, the UK, the US, but you've come back with the hope and intent to create something, right? Because you saw a problem and you didn't run away, you ran towards it. So in 10 to 15 years, as Nigeria is progressing in this journey, or Africa in general, actually, because we have the same issues across the board. What does that look like? What does the optimal African country that's designed from the power sector point of view look like?
I like Egypt.
Egypt, interesting.
Yes, I like Egypt
They implemented the Siemens plan pretty seamlessly, right?
I like the time frame which you've mentioned, which is 10 to 15 years, because it's a good time within which to look back over the development in a sector such as power, which has gestation periods, for many of the activities that you would want to do. So I like that time frame. But time in itself, one of the things you realize that time in itself does not change. It is the actions, consistent actions that you take over time that result in the change you want to see. So we see that though Egypt was, government initiated, but consistently with a focus on the vision, you can have 99%, availability uptime. But if you don't take those actions, I'm sorry, in 10, 15 years, you'll still be having those conversations. So it's really about taking concerted, consistent actions in order to attain and arrive at the goal. I like Egypt because of where they are. Yes.
Interesting. Egypt is such a unique scenario because of they had a lot of things going for them. They had the demand, then they had the government to say we will do this together, and then they had the investments as well. Why haven't we gotten there in Nigeria?
Why haven't we gotten there? Yeah. I think that's another podcast.
Thank you so much, Jumoke. Thank you.
Definitely another podcast. Thank you, Emeka.
But just to end on this note, because I always like to end things on positive notes, if we talk to the sector players, you see that the sector is improving, debts are being paid. You see that the government subsidies are reducing. So we are getting there a little bit slower, but I think it's that snowball effect. Once you start doing something, we'll now start rolling, and then by the time we know it, we'll be able to tell the GSM story in the power sector, hopefully. Any last words?
Well, last words for me is I'm also optimistic about the sector, and I believe the state electricity market, the decentralization, is a game changer. States will evolve at their own paces, but we would be able to see, instead of banding everybody together to go at the same speed, whether they are willing or not, now you'll see the sprinters. It's not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. And that snowballing effect, I think, the probability is heightened with the development of state electricity markets. And in over that 10 to 15 years time frame, we'll be able to see remarkable developments with those who have run with the vision and taken, beaten the bullet and made the right changes over that period of time.
Interesting. So you're telling all your investor friends from back in the day in New York to come and invest in Africa.
Nigeria is open for business, and the states are open for business.
Thank you so much, Jumoke. This has been fantastic.
Rebecca. Thank you. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. This podcast is brought to you by Next Year Capital, committed to driving conversations that shape Africa's energy future. Please subscribe, share, and stay tuned. Until next time, I am Emeka Okpukpara Jr., and this has been Connecting the Dots.